What if the most iconic event in A Song of Ice and Fire never happened? Of course, I'm talking about the iconic Red Wedding.
Let's explore a world where Robb Stark discovers the betrayal before it's too late. How would this change the fate of the North, the Stark family, and in all of Westeros? To explore what could have been, we should first revisit the events that led up to the Red Wedding, namely the Lannister and Stark portion of the War of the Five Kings. After that, we'll zoom in on the plot itself, and finally, I'll try to paint a picture of how events might have played out differently from the original.
Let's start with an angry Jaime Lannister, who doesn't give a damn about his white cloak and rides for Casterly Rock upon hearing about Tyrion's capture by Catelyn Stark. Tywin then orders Gregor Clegane, the low-key MVP of this conflict, to pretend to be a brigand and raid the Riverlands, because apparently, the Riverlands is where lords use their armies to express their emotions. He also wanted to lure Ned Stark out of King's Landing.
In the North, Robb Stark calls his banners. The Karstarks, Boltons, Hornwoods, and Umbers gather at Wintertown, while others, such as the Reeds, Ryswells, Dustins, and Lords Manderley and Flint, wait to join him along the King's Road. Edmure Tully starts panicking when he sees that his lands are already burning, and an angry Kingsguard's prodigal son is gathering a host at his border. So he raises his 11,000 men, ordering Vance and Piper to scout out the Goldtooth. However, the men Edmure sent to the Goldtooth get absolutely deleted by Jaime Lannister and his army of 15,000. Gregor Clegane somehow managed to sneak past Piper and Vance's scouts at this time with like 500 mounted men. I assume the Rivermen weren't able to see them because of the mountain terrain. After ninjaing past the scouts, Gregor ambushes the 120 men under Beric Dondarrion at the Mummers Ford with Daddy Tywin and wipes out a supermajority of them. Dondarrion is slain, but ends up being brought back to life because Thoros of Myr was roller maxing. Apparently, Gregor even managed to cut Sir Raymond Derry and his warhorse in half with a single blow. Because I'm a nerd, I did some basic physics calculations to get a ballpark number to quantify the insanity of this feat. The TLDR is that the amount of energy required to bisect through chainmail a human and a horse ended up being the same amount of energy a 200 kilogram upright piano falling off a 12-story building creates, except spread out on the much smaller surface area of his 6-foot greatsword edge. I'm going to go on a tangent here because Ser Gregor La Montagne, an 8-foot-tall, 700-pound tank composed of muscle, steel, and sociopathy, is able to commit more war crimes per minute than I can type this script. I don't even know if I'm more impressed by his sheer inhuman feats or by the fact that his horse was able to carry his giant ass all around the Riverlands for months. If I were on the other side and saw this psychopath riding towards me, chopping people literally in half, with a 6-foot greatsword in one hand, while riding a 7-foot-tall battle Clydesdale, I'd pull a hound and say, "Screw the king," then dig some holes on the Quiet Isle. My liege lord can deal with the 10-foot-tall, 3.5 thousand pound unit going 35 miles per hour through his lands. Edmure is understandably scrambling from the Lannisters' opening moves. In a panic, he decides to split up his forces so his warrior aristocracy can return to their lands and resist Gregor Clegane's various Geneva Code violations. He forgot that ape, together strong. Thankfully for him, Robb Stark's host is at the Twins, House Frey's giant fortified toll booth. Walder Frey, in his graciousness, allows the northern lords to parley. Jaime, meanwhile, blitzes what is left of Edmure's host outside the walls of Riverrun and basically starts cleaning up the undermanned rivermen, capturing Edmure and many other lords, and almost routs them entirely. But Tidus Blackwood comes in clutch and garrisons Riverrun, forcing the Kingslayer to lay siege. So Tywin's host starts marching to Harrenhal, all while destroying scattered Rivermen forces on their merry way, probably humming the Rains of Castamere the whole time. The GOAT Gregor Clegane and the Mountain Boys burn down the Pipers and Bracken's castles, and he must have been a Blackwood fan because he stole all of Bracken's food and slept with his daughter. Tywin proves that he and Gregor are a power couple, though, because Tywin and Kevin take Raventree Hall. The Super Lannister Bros also capture Darry, Maidenpool, and finally Harrenhal before they sit for a minute and chill, which allows us to head back to the Twins, where Robb Stark is meeting with Lord Walder Frey. Ironically, it is the leech vampire himself. Pink is definitely a manly color Bolton who advises Robb Stark on the dangers of trusting House Frey. Roose of all people had warned Robb about his future co-conspirator. With Walder holding Robb's balls in a vice, though, he has to agree to a betrothal with his choice of any one of Lord Walder Frey's single bachelorettes. Robb knows that it's river bros before river hoes, though, so he and his council come up with a diversion plan to split his army so that he could feint Tywin and strike the cocky Jaime Lannister, whose forces are now sieging Riverrun. Roose is given command of around 17,000 Northern and Frey infantry and 700 horse, while Robb takes 90% of the cavalry, or 7,000 mounted men, to throw a surprise party for the Kingslayer camped outside of Riverrun. Anyway, Roose marches south along the east bank of the Trident, saying, "Here, kitty, kitty," to attract the lion's share of attention, and then treats his forces to a starlight hike. The Battle of the Green Fork then occurs, which, by the way, the show had poisoned my mind about the details. My headcanon was that at most, Roose had like 6,000 men. Turns out, he actually had 75% of the entire Northern army. Unfortunately, the surprise night hike did little, and despite his efforts, Tywin defeats Roose's forces handily. It's almost like getting a night's rest is beneficial to a warrior's combat effectiveness. I bet Roose was riding on his horse the entire time, laughing at the infantry's misery. Complete disaster is averted, though. Roose retreats and regroups his army near Moat Cailleen. The Northmen at this point have gotten enough steps in for all of Westeros. This was quite impressive of Roose, if I'm completely honest. A worse commander could have lost a lot more soldiers against Tywin Lannister in open battle. This is when the North finally starts getting some W's. Jaime was trying to perform a friendly siege of Riverrun, but the Lords Piper and Vance keep rudely interrupting him by attacking his supply lines and nibbling at the edges of his army. Jaime got tired of it and rode after them with 2,500 cavalry, only for his party to be crashed by the entire Northern cavalry, who had not RSVP'd for this event. Jokes aside, this is all possible because the Riverlands MVP, the Blackfish, is a covert genius, wiping out all of Jaime's scouts without raising alarm and severing the bird-based communication network. The Kingslayer is captured, and in the Battle of the Camps, most of his 15,000-man host is slain. The only survivors reported are 4,000, led by Lord Prester, that made it back to the Golden Tooth, Roose returns to the twins, marries Walder Frey in exchange for gold equal to her weight. Roose truly embodies the leeches he uses so often. Everyone else is not having a great time, but he's having a blast playing everyone. I think Lady Barbary Dustin said it best with this quote. Roose has no feelings, you see. Those leeches that he loves so well sucked all the passions out of him years ago. He does not love, he does not hate, he does not grieve. This is a game to him, mildly diverting. Some men hunt, some hawk, some tumble dice. Roose plays with men. You and me, these Freys, Lord Manderley, his plump new wife, even his bastard. We are but his playthings. I'm going to be brief with some events between Robb's victory at River Run and when stuff starts hitting the fan so that this script doesn't keep ballooning. Tywin commands Lord Stafford Lannister to raise a new army to replace the one lost at the Whispering Wood. Ned Stark is dead. Robb becomes king in the north. Raventree, Derry, and Stonehenge are recaptured by the Riverlords. Tywin has Gregor and Vargo run wild in the Riverlands, committing more atrocities and also hunting the Brotherhood without banners. Balon, Joffrey, Renly, and Stannis join the Pointy Hat Club. Tywin decides Harrenhal is a good place to chill, so he can tell his children to stop burning the entire kingdom down while he is busy dealing with the first dumpster fire his crotch goblins created. Robb decides to vacation in the Westerlands and wins a crushing victory at Oxcross, destroying the new army that was being raised before it can even do a war, forcing Tywin to deal with the war actually affecting his lands. The Iron Men pull a sneaky and invade the north, while the Northerners are on summer vacation. Edmure kind of defeats Tywin and stops him from going west. Robb is injured at the crag and develops Florence Nightingale syndrome. Harren rolls in his grave as Harrenhal is captured a second time in the war. Already, greatest fortress, my ass. We will get back to Roose soon. Stannis uses a cheat code that gives him Storm's End and kills his brother, letting him march on the capital. Tywin heads south to save his cubs by teaming up with the fugitive Tyrell armies. See, kids, it's okay to commit treason if you make forgiveness the king's best interest. Walder Frey ghosts Robb after he makes the very honorable and very stupid decision of marrying Jane Westerling, breaking his betrothal. Jaime and Brienne are captured by Roose and held at Harrenhal. This is where the Red Wedding really starts cooking. I believe it was here that Roose began communication with Tywin and later Walder Frey. He would have DM'd Tywin about Jaime Lannister, who had been brought into his custody by the brave companions, and when most of the loyal Stark men under Roose's command start generously dying in battle, things started looking bad for Robb. Around this time, the Freys had told Roose about Robb's marriage and their lord's anger. The North was effectively lost and held by the Greyjoys, and the Reach had joined Tywin's army. Interestingly, Roose tells Sir Helman Tallheart to join the siege of Duskendale at this time, the same battle where Randil Tarly surprised the northern men, causing them to retreat and be ambushed again by La Montagne, killing a quarter of Robb's army. Roose clearly set them up, probably as a gift to Tywin for having Jaime returned maimed. It was also noted by Arya that after meeting with the Freys, who told him about Robb's marriage to Jane, Roose decided to go hunt wolves outside Harrenhal. Nice one, George. Roose soon marches north to the Twins. While most certainly in contact with the Lannisters, Roose takes his time when crossing the Trident, and his rearguard is attacked by Sir Gregor Clegane. On the other side, he leaves Stark loyal houses to guard the river. taking only Dreadfort and Carhold men with him, the latter lordless, outnumbered, and mad at Robb. Easily convinced soldiers, if you ask me. Gregor and his Mounties somehow killed 2,000 stranded Northerners. He must have a kill count in the hundreds at this point alone. This, my friend, is where things will change from the original timeline. While Roose is marching north toward the Twins, ready to become the new Lord Paramount of the North, his plot has been discovered at River Run due to a communication error between the scheming Freys. The rain had begun to fall again as Catelyn Stark rode beside her son Robb, watching the distant towers of the Twins loom larger with each passing moment. The weather matched the mood, somber, heavy with tension, and filled with the weight of unspoken fears. The dark clouds above mirrored her thoughts, swirling with dread and uncertainty. She cast a glance at Robb, who rode with his jaw set, his young face already bearing the lines of a man far older than his years. Ever since they had intercepted lame Lothar Frey's letter, a coldness had settled over her heart. She had seen many things in her life, but nothing had prepared her for the depths of treachery that lay hidden beneath the Frey's offer of reconciliation. The wedding they were riding to was no celebration, it was a death trap. But the wolf had learned of the trap, and now they were springing one of their own. They had taken Lothar Frey quietly, away from prying eyes in a chamber where the flickering torchlight cast long shadows on the stone walls. Catelyn had watched as Robb questioned him, her son's voice cold and unyielding. She had seen the fear in Lothar's eyes, and then the horror as he realized that his plot had been uncovered. Under pressure, he had spilled everything, every detail of the Frey's treachery, the betrayal that would have ended House Stark. Now, as they approached the gates of the Twins, the words Lothar had spoken echoed in her mind. She could see the walls rising before them, could feel the weight of history bearing down. This was a place where old oaths and ancient grudges intersected, where promises were made and broken in the same breath. Robb had taken the knowledge of the betrayal and turned it into a weapon. They had devised their plan in the dead of night, the candle flames casting eerie shadows across the maps and parchments that littered the table. Every step had been considered, every move weighed and measured. And now, as they crossed the bridge into the Frey's stronghold, they carried the weight of that decision with them. The portcullis creaked as it was raised, the iron chains clattering like old bones. The sound sent a chill through Catelyn, a reminder of the countless souls who had passed through these gates, unaware of the doom that awaited them. But today, the Starks were not unsuspecting victims. They were wolves, and they had come to bite. Walder Frey awaited them in the Great Hall, as they had expected. The old man sat in his high-backed chair, his thin lips stretched in a mockery of a smile. Around him, the hall was filled with Freys, sons, daughters, grandchildren, all of them watching with wary eyes. The tension was thick in the air, the silence heavy as they entered. Catelyn's eyes scanned the room, noting the exits, the guards, the placement of each Frey. She could feel Robb's presence beside her, a steadying force amidst the storm. But beneath her calm exterior, her heart pounded with the fear of what might come. "Your Grace," Walder Frey rasped, his voice as thin as his frame. "Welcome to the Twins. I trust your journey was uneventful." Robb dismounted, his hand resting lightly on the pommel of his sword. "The journey was uneventful," he said, his tone polite but cold, "though the weather could have been kinder." Walder's eyes gleamed with something between amusement and suspicion. The river has a way of rising unexpectedly. Catelyn felt a shiver run down her spine. The old man was speaking in riddles, hinting at the treachery that was to come, unaware that his own words were a noose tightening around his neck. Robb took a step forward. "It's not the river I'm concerned about," he said. "It's the storm that's brewing within these walls." The hall fell into a tense silence, the words hanging in the air, like a blade poised to strike. Walder Frey's smile faltered, confusion flickering in his eyes as he looked from Robb to Catelyn. "What is this?" the old man demanded, his voice rising. "This," Robb replied, his voice hardening, "is justice." At that moment, the doors of the hall were thrown open, and Stark soldiers poured in, swords drawn. Catelyn saw the shock ripple through the Freys, their hands scrambling for weapons. But they were too slow. The northern men moved with precision, cutting down any who dared to resist. Grey Wind, Robb's direwolf, bounded into the hall with a savage snarl, his massive form a blur of fur and fangs. The beast leapt at those who tried to flee, bringing them down with a fury that echoed the vengeance in Catelyn's heart. Walder Frey was seized by Stark men and forced to his knees before Robb. The old man's frailty was laid bare, his hands shaking as he realized his time had come. The sounds of battle still echoed in the great hall, but here, at the center of it all, there was only silence. Catelyn stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. This was the man who had planned to butcher her son, to end her line. She had lived through the loss of her husband, the death of her children. But this was different. This was vengeance within her grasp. Robb drew his sword, and Catelyn watched as the blade caught the light. She felt the weight of everything they had lost, everything they had fought for, and knew that this moment would define the future of the North. "For my father," Robb said, his voice low and resolute. "For my brothers. For the North." The sword fell, and with it, the last breath of Walder Frey. As the old man's body crumpled to the ground, the battle in the hall came to an end. The Freys who had survived were disarmed and taken captive, their plans of treachery lying in ruins. Catelyn looked around the hall at the bodies of those who had sought to betray them, and felt a cold satisfaction settle over her. But there was no joy in victory, only the heavy burden of what was to come. They had won this battle, but the war was far from over, and in the shadows darker forces still conspired to bring them down. As they secured the twins and prepared to send word to their allies, Catelyn knew that the ripples of this day would spread across Westeros, changing the course of history. Epilogue. Robb Stark now finds himself in a precarious situation. He has taken the twins, executed Walder Frey, and exposed the Red Wedding plot, but the war's far from over. The Lannisters will not take this lightly, and Roose Bolton, marching north with betrayal in his heart, will soon learn that his plans have been thwarted. The North is not yet lost, but it is a land divided, with enemies both within and without. The capture of the twins could be the turning point in the War of the Five Kings, but it also brings new challenges. With the Freys now hostages and Roose Bolton's treachery revealed, Robb must navigate a treacherous path filled with political intrigue and open warfare. His survival and that of the North now depend on the alliances he can forge and the battles he can win. Yet, in this moment of victory, there is also a sense of dread. The wolves have bared their teeth, but the lions of the Lannisters still hold power, and the Game of Thrones is far from over. The North must brace for the storm to come, a storm that will test the strength of House Stark and the loyalty of those who follow them. In this alternate history, where the Red Wedding is thwarted and the North stands united, the future of Westeros is uncertain. The ripple effects of this moment will spread far and wide, altering the fates of kings and queens, lords and ladies, and common folk alike. The game is still being played, and the outcome is anything but certain. If you enjoyed this exploration of what could have been, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing this video with your fellow A Song of Ice and Fire fans. What other events in Westeros would you like to see reimagined? Let us know in the comments below, and who knows, your suggestion might be the next what if we dive into. Until then, keep your sword sharp and your wit sharper, because in the Game of Thrones, you win or you die. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.